Hey everyone, this is Brian from the Tennis IQ podcast. Josh and I hope that you are enjoying the content and discussions that we put out week after week. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to continue to produce quality episodes, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Currently, we have 3 tiers of support: the fan level at $3 per month, the supporter level at $7 per month, and the champion level at $20 per month. Benefits of joining the Tennis IQ podcast community include episode transcripts, participation in book club discussions, and access to monthly masterclasses with me and Josh. For more on these benefits of support, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership. Thank you so much. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Brian Lomax.
And I'm Josh Berger. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about tough losses and how to come back after a tough loss, which is something that every player experiences at one point or another, often multiple times throughout the years. And, after that tough loss takes place, how can we best put it behind us, learn from it, move on? And we're going to talk about this in sort of a few different steps. First, sort of from a definitional standpoint, thinking about what actually is a tough loss. What are some examples of what that could be? So starting there, then talking about what people generally do. How do people generally respond and react to tough losses when they come up? And then we will offer some different suggestions for how you can go about responding to a tough loss in maybe more of a productive way. So to get things started, Brian, wanted to see, in terms of maybe defining a tough loss or maybe how we think about this concept to get things started. Curious if you could, maybe share some maybe examples of, what comes to mind for you in terms of tough losses.
For sure. And I think when we discussed this as a topic, tough loss automatically went to maybe playing badly or a match I thought I should win, something like that. And then thought about it some more and it's like, that's not it. There's more to this. But those could be tough losses. It could be that I went into a match with expectations, that dangerous word of winning, thinking I'm better than the other person, and then somehow it doesn't work out. That could be tough. It could be a tough hit to the ego. Could be that, I just performed poorly overall. Maybe I was a little too passive. Maybe I didn't commit to a game plan like we talked about in our last episode. Or maybe I was too nervous, too tight, and just too focused more on the outcome. But then I also thought about, Josh, some other times where you play really great and you get all the way to the end and there's just a few points left. And for some reason, not that you did anything wrong per se, but you just didn't come out on top. That can be tough. That's a tough experience. And I think, as we were talking earlier, it made me think about Rafael Nadal versus Dominic Thiem at the 2018 US Open, where Nadal ended up winning in a fifth set tiebreaker. Thiem had won the first set 6-0. And even Nadal said this in his press conference, that Thiem didn't do anything wrong. Did everything right to put himself in a position to win. But, at the end, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. That's a tough loss. So even when you play well, there could be some tough losses. Couple ones that I want you to talk a little bit more about that you had brought up in our kind of pre-show talk was around maybe when a match is personal, maybe when a match has a team implication.
Yeah, I think both of those examples certainly come up. I think sometimes, a match can be personal for one reason or another. Maybe you've played this person in the past and you've beaten them. And then that leads to certain expectations of beating them in the future. Maybe they've beaten you. And maybe during that match, certain things happen. Maybe you felt like you should have won. Maybe there were questions over line calls. Maybe, maybe other things happened. There can certainly be, as I think everybody knows, there can certainly be drama, right? So maybe there was, some sort of drama last time you faced this person. So I think that, yeah, I think, one example as well that can certainly come up is, yeah, just when it's personal against the player. And then I think another example is, our different team events, whether that's, for junior players, that could be junior team tennis, that could be high school, that could be college as well. For adults, maybe that's USTA leagues or, or other sorts of team events. I know that there's things section against section, both for juniors and for adults. But yeah, being able to, sometimes when you lose a match for your team, it can feel more impactful, where it's not just you that's losing; it's it impacts others. So yeah, those are I would say are some other examples. Also, when it's a big event, right? Maybe it's an event you've been looking forward to for a while and then maybe you didn't end up performing the way that you wanted to, or you lost in a close match or something like that. So I think there's different sorts of examples that yeah that would be included under this idea of a tough loss.
Yeah. And I think it's good to identify what that is and that it isn't just playing poorly. It could be you played well, or and then maybe at the end something went wrong. We didn't really cover that, but you could also have played really well and then perhaps got nervous. And and I don't really like to use the word choke, but that's the common phrase that people use, and you end up really changing your winning game into something that's a little bit less, and you can lose there. That can also be very tough to deal with. So before we get into examining how to best deal with tough losses, let's examine a little bit how people typically deal with tough losses, because I think the difference between being kind of a mediocre or novice performer and being a great performer who is able to sustain success, experience continued success, really lies in the difference between what people typically do and what great competitors do. So I'll throw out a couple, Josh, and then I want to get your thoughts on some others. But I think when people typically, or how they typically deal with tough losses, one of the ones that I hear about the most, and I have personally experienced this, is rumination and excessive analysis. Ruminating over the match. I remember, Josh, a couple of tough losses in my 20s. Both were 7-6 in the third. And at the time I had a corporate job. I felt like I was unable to function for about a week. I just couldn't get these matches out of my mind. Just over and over again, what could I have done? How one of the matches I had a 6-2 lead in that third set tiebreaker and I lost 6 points in a row. And again, not that I did anything particularly wrong, but I didn't do anything particularly right either. So looking at that didn't help me. Thinking about it for an entire week before I was able to put it behind me. So I think that's one way that people often treat their tough losses, is they just think about it over and over again, never really coming to any sort of learning or decision as to what to do next. I think also tough losses, one way that people let it affect them is maybe their identity as a player. We did an episode juxtaposing performance-based identity versus purpose-based identity. And if how we feel about ourselves is always based on our results, well, tough losses can be difficult for that. And so we might go into kind of a self-criticism shell, or a place where we're criticizing ourselves or we're feeling bad about ourselves, our confidence gets lower, etc. So those are a few, Josh, I think that are ways that people typically look at it. But what are some ways that came to your mind?
Yeah, I think the examples that you brought up are certainly true in terms of people, ruminating, just continuing to think about the match for an extended period of time. And you hear pros talk about this. I know I think that there are a number of different examples. I've heard of, examples of players who they'll lose a match and they'll just sort of feel like they need to be alone for a couple days and just sort of process it, think about it. I don't know if that's necessarily the healthiest approach, but I think it is something that often tends to happen. I think often people avoid it as well, right? They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. You bring it, if somebody brings it up, they're not really willing to engage sometimes. I remember back when I was coaching at the college level, and sometimes, somebody would lose a match, and I would attempt to talk with them about it. And, you know, there were certainly times where where certain players just really didn't want to. They would say, "Oh, well, I would say, how did the match go?" They say, "Oh, I lost 6-2, 6-2." And I'd say, "Okay, well, tell me more." And there was a clear difference between moments where players were really willing to engage and talk about it and talk about what they did well, what could have gone better, maybe what they would have done differently next time, maybe what they learned from it, things like that. And other times where either they weren't willing to or they weren't ready to maybe engage. And another thing we could talk about is also when, right? When is the best time to maybe talk through some of these things, right? It's probably not in the minutes directly after a match. Generally, people need a bit more time to process it than that, but just trying to figure out what is the best time to have that conversation while it's still fresh in somebody's mind before they've forgotten some of the key details, but also giving them enough time to process it. Um, but yeah, I would say so. Yeah, in addition to your examples, I would say a big one is just people maybe not willing to talk about it, not wanting to talk about it, think about it, sort of avoiding that potential conversation, which I think can certainly come up as well. And I think I think it can cause people sometimes to be hesitant to play in other matches, play in other tournaments because they think back to that pain from the last time they were in a similar situation. So I think that can certainly happen.
And I think one more that I'll add on there is that people may just make excuses for what went on, normally pointing at things out of their control. Windy today, he or she was making bad calls, or the umpire did something wrong, or, whatever. But it typically is something that is not fully within their control. They're excuses that literally they're not really the reason that the player lost, but it's an easy way to give yourself an out. And so that happens very often, is that people will come off the court and start making excuses for why they lost. And so the difficulty with that is you'll never really process what occurred out there, right? So, I think those are probably a good number of how people typically deal with tough or difficult losses. So let's get into some maybe healthier approaches, Josh, maybe even on the mindset side as well. If you could sort of design the ultimate mindset of a client of yours that you would get the most out of a tough loss and a tough loss reflection conversation, what would be some of the sort of underlying perspectives or beliefs for that person to have that kind of really productive conversation, relatively soon after a match?
Good question. I would say that the ultimate goal is to be better from having this experience, right? So, okay, you had this loss, and how can you be a better player post loss, right? How can this loss contribute to that improvement? And I think that happens in a couple. I think that can happen in a couple of different ways. I think that can happen first, sort of through some sort of reflection process. So being able to reflect on the match itself, what that player did well, what they didn't do as well, what they learned. Did they follow through on some sort of a game plan? Did they make adjustments? Did they have certain process goals going into the match? Did they execute on those things? Questions like that. So sort of starting with that reflection piece. Um, and I think that it's very easy after a match, especially after a tough loss, to almost oversimplify it into, well, I didn't play well, or I didn't handle pressure well, or just one underlying reason why the result was the way that it was. But generally, that's not actually the case. Yes, that's a piece of the puzzle, but there are also things you did well. There are also maybe reasons why your opponent played well and reasons why your opponent deserved to win. Right. So I think the reflection process can help you sort of build a bigger picture for what fully happened. How does what are all the different pieces into, what actually happened out there. And yeah, so sort of start with that process, and then, maybe think about, okay, well, what would I have done differently had I, could I go back to that moment? So maybe how would I handle that differently if I was in that situation again? And then, attached to that is what do I want to do differently next time? So maybe adjustments I could make. Um, and then I think other things to consider are, okay, we want to obviously put this behind us. It's over. It's in the past. Nothing we can do about it. And then I think, yeah, being able to sort of view it as, this is a learning experience. This is practice in a certain way, right? We've had, conversation. We had a conversation with Christina Rollo and Dave DeHaan, where Christina brought up this idea, which is one that we've referenced in past episodes as well, about everything being practice. That, okay, we had this match, and yes, this feels important. Yes, we're sorry that we lost it, but this in a certain way is practice, where, this is practice for other matches. We will have plenty of other matches in the future. And how we handle this match, and ultimately how we reflect and learn from it and move on from this match, is also practice for future experiences that we'll have. So if we can view the match in that sort of a helpful, productive way, as, yes, this match feels really important right now, but this is also, practice and a learning experience for my future as a tennis player. It helps a person to sort of see that. It helps a person keep things in perspective and see the big picture a lot more, where it doesn't feel like it's all about this one match or this one tournament, this one loss. This one match is a learning experience and is practice for the future, and is a step towards you becoming that better player, which ultimately, as I said right in the beginning, is the goal. How can this match help you become that better player? So yeah, sort of to summarize, starts with that reflection process, then thinking about, maybe what they would have done differently and what they'll do differently next time. And then, yes, maybe developing healthier perspectives around competition itself, and understanding that each match maybe isn't yes, it feels really important right now, but maybe it's not quite as important as we're making it out to be. And that this is ultimately practice for the future and a way to help us become a better player for the future as well.
It's challenging to do this because, our society really values results. And you hear it in the media, you hear it from people who are around the sport. It's all about wins, or losses, but it's all about that outcome. But in order to produce more positive outcomes, you have to really dedicate yourself, I think, Josh, to being a better learner. And by being a better learner, we're working toward that goal that you said. Can we prioritize becoming the best player we can become over winning today? That doesn't mean we're not trying to win. When we talk about everything is practice toward the goal of becoming the best we can be. You mentioned healthy perspectives on competition. And we've shared this definition in the past, but the more that you as an athlete can be centered on these three things, that competitive athletes enjoy competing. Number one, for tennis, it means enjoying the battle, enjoying the struggle. Number two, competitive players see competition as a process of learning and improvement. So every match is part of getting better. It is not validating necessarily who you are in this moment. Like, you must be this player, you must win this match. That doesn't exist. And then thirdly, and maybe one of the most important parts of this, is competitive players have a very strong desire. I'm going to call it a will to win. Vince Lombardi, the famous NFL head coach for the Green Bay Packers, who was somewhat misquoted talking about how winning was the only thing. He actually meant to say, and he clarified this later, that the will to win was the most important and only thing. So when we're competing and we're talking about everything as practice, practicing the will to win is a part of that. We never want anybody to go out there and say, well, it was just practice, so it didn't matter. That's not true. No, we're practicing to become something great. You can only become something great through wholehearted and maximum effort, not by saying something doesn't matter. Your potential is on the line every time you go out on the court. That matters. So I think the more that a player can be centered on, this is about who I'm becoming. This is not about who I am. We mentioned earlier that, some people being better than other people matters more than being better. And want to make sure that we recognize that, because we all have that. We all sink back into that ego kind of orientation of, I want to win today. I want to beat this person. And ultimately, you need to feel some of that to have that will to win, to really motivate you, to get that desire up. That's where you'll actually learn the most, is when you do that. So I think that's to me is a key perspective, Josh, that if that's your North Star, then this process becomes easier. As opposed to if the most important thing to you is like winning today, and I got to win every day, you're going to really struggle with this. Tennis won't be enjoyable. You're going to learn less. And ultimately, your ability to manage that will to win is going to go up and down with the score in a match, and how you're feeling. So I think those are some key things. I think you hit a lot of good stuff on the practical side. I think I'll say one extra thing on this piece is that many of these losses are probably experiences you needed to have for one reason or another, whether it's you didn't have a game plan and you should have had a game plan. All right, we need game plans. So we got to learn that. Or I should be planning out my points better between points. Or it could be that there's something about my character. Maybe I need to have more courage when I'm out there. Whatever that is, something, the sport, the result is telling you that something needs to change. And if you have the right mindset, you can be open to listening to it. But like we said, some players they're closed-minded about listening to that. They're not willing necessarily to change, to risk a potential loss for many future wins. And, I could think about one match of mine in particular in which I lost a difficult match in a national tournament, and it was totally on me. I learned the lesson, and after that, I had one of the best summers of my career. But it wouldn't have happened without that loss. Like, I needed to lose that way and to make the change, to almost reach a low point that said, all right, you can't keep doing this. You have to change something. And I was open to that message, and it led to the best season of my career. So I'm grateful for that loss. I needed that loss. And I think when you can look at some of these matches as like, you know what, this is going to make me a better player. Of course I'm disappointed that I lost, but if I can take the lessons here and move on, then I can be a better player. So we don't want to overanalyze and ruminate on this whole thing. We want to look at it in a very honest and objective way, focused on what can I learn from this, and then move on. And then let's go practice. Let's get out to the next tournament. Let's put into place what we learned from this last one and simply try to be better.
I think that's spot on. And I like that you added that last point about it being a necessary experience, because, I think if we're viewing it in that long-term way, that it's not all about this one match, this one tournament, as much as it feels like it is right now, then we can understand that, this match is showing us what we need to work on, what we can improve on, what what we ought to do to increase our chances of winning similar matches in the future. And that really is what it takes to be the best competitor, the best player we can be, right? It's us constantly striving to be better, to be the best that we can. And that's us, understanding after each match, after each tournament, each experience that there are areas to improve. So I think, yeah, if it's, okay, maybe after the match, I recognize, you know what? Maybe I need to take more time between points. Or you know what? Maybe my body language needs to be more consistently positive out there. Maybe I need to have more of a game plan. Maybe I need to be able and willing to make more adjustments out there. Whatever it is, okay, can we, since we had that experience and we learned that, if we can apply that to the future, then this match became that necessary experience. We had this necessary experience of having this tough loss. Yes, it was painful in the moment, but because of that, we made those adjustments. We made those adjustments. We made those improvements. And wow, look at where we are now. And partly because we had that loss. So I think that's a great way to think about it. It's not all about the loss itself. It's about what this loss ended up causing. And sometimes that causes some sort of a chain effect of being able to make those improvements that are needed to help us become that better and better player. So definitely, yeah, in agreement that's an important piece here. um yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, I think it's also about really just finding ways to fully put it behind you. I think it's easy to hold on to tough losses in some way or another. Maybe it makes you hesitant to compete in the future. Maybe you don't want to compete for a period of time. Maybe you start to doubt your abilities or lose some confidence. But I think when you can fully put it behind you, just in the same way as being able to fully put a point behind you, can you fully put this match behind you? Once you've learned from it, once you've, hopefully taken some of those lessons away, thought about maybe adjustments you want to make, can you fully put that match behind you? Which is sometimes easier said than done, I think. Curious, Brian, if you have any maybe suggestions on that side of things in terms of, a tough loss, how players can, fully put it behind them and move on rather than continuing to hold on to aspects of it.
I'll just point out something that we mentioned in a previous episode from Dr. Richard Young as one of the differentiators, again, between novice performers and those who have continued success, is that moving on from it is something that athletes who have continued success do. Not moving on is something that novice performers do. So, ruminating and analyzing excessively, that's what people who do not have continued success typically do. You can obviously have moments of success doing that, but it's a less healthy way, and you won't get as good as the person who moves on. So if the goal is to really become the best player you can become, you owe it to yourself to move on and go forward. If your whole point is just about winning every single match that you play, that's going to be very difficult to do because it's not fully within your control. And you're going to get stuck. You're only going to be able to get so good. Everybody has these barriers that they face in their career. I'm working with some college players right now who are having a hard time between becoming the best they can be and beating just people that are in front of them. And what they're doing is they're playing in such a way that they can beat who's in front of them, but they'll never beat that next level because that game that they're playing now, it doesn't translate to a higher level, right? So there has to be some level of commitment to trying to be better, maybe losing a match or two, but also maybe not. He may not actually lose any matches. It's just looking at different ways of being better. And so do you want to set yourself an artificial ceiling where, let's use UTR as an example. Let's say you've gotten to be a 10 UTR, but you're now playing a game that can't go any further. Is that satisfying to you? Or are you willing to break through some of that? Because you're going to have some tough losses as a 10. You're going to learn from it. You're going to be able to say, all right, this needs to be better. I need to be better. I need to commit to my tactics more. I need to hit my forehand more. I can't just keep slicing my backhand. When I'm in trouble, I need to try something different to get better. And that may take some time. But if you can honestly, when you do have tough losses, reflect on what needs to be better. And very often it's process-oriented stuff, not just winning. Stuff that's in your control that you can work on, then you can break through that artificial ceiling that you may have set for yourself. So I think that is an important way of looking at this, Josh, so that we can put stuff behind you. I would just say it's an imperative for anyone who's listening. If they want to become better, they have to emphasize who they're becoming over who they are right now, right? Because quite frankly, who cares where you are right now? It's about who you're becoming. At the end of your career, it's not going to be about the losses, or I hope like when you reflect on the end of your career, it's not about like, oh, well, I lost to this person and that person and so forth. It should be more about the journey, how much you've improved, how much maybe these tough losses shaped you and defined your character. So when we think of them as necessary, they're going to be necessary kind of in the look back of like, yeah, that was a tough loss, but I came through and I had these great wins. Or I learned so much better, or that, my game really shot up after I learned these things. So I think, when we do look at our own careers, remember that people, whether it's yourself or others, are not going to define you by your losses. They're going to define you, first of all, by who you are and how you competed, what kind of person you were on the court. Then they'll probably talk more about your wins and what a great player you were. Everybody's got losses. That's just the way it is. This is not, we don't get to pick our opponents. So I think that would be another thing for people to keep in mind, Josh, is that let's not define ourselves by our losses. Let's define ourselves by our journey and how far we have become, or how far we have come.
I would absolutely agree. I think, and I think that the same is true when we think about the pros. Yes, every single top pro player has had tough losses. But when we think about them, I think we think about their accomplishments, their achievements, and as you said, which I think is an extremely important point, who they are as a person, how they conduct themselves, how they compete, how they battle, how they move on after tough losses, I think can also define them as well, right? So yeah, I think, in the moment it may feel, after a tough loss, it may feel that loss is defining you. I can't believe I lost to this person. I can't believe I lost when I had 3 match points. I can't believe, I can't believe I lost to this player with this UTR, this ranking, or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think once you have some time to reflect on it, to learn from it, to move on, to play some other matches, it's a lot easier to put things into perspective and to understand that they don't define us. And really, losses and wins don't define us. So we can't identify with them so much. We want to, identify as trying to be the best player that we can be. And part of that is the fact that you are going to lose matches, and some of those matches are certainly going to be tough losses. I think the one way to guarantee that you'll never have tough losses is just to not play the sport, to not compete, right? That's a great way to make sure that doesn't happen. But assuming that you want to play, assuming that you do want to, work on your game and improve and become that best player, it's going to happen. So I think trying to approach it in the best possible way, being realistic about it, and then having, being really clear about your goals of, moving on, letting this experience help you rather than hurt you and hold you back, are all, critical pieces in terms of viewing this tough loss in the most constructive way, but also being able to, to have this tough loss help you in some way.
And maybe, another way to just really turn the page, Josh, is just get back out on the court. Just go try to practice with some passion, work on your game, have some fun with the sport, and maybe that will also help you to process and just let go of it rather than waiting a period of time. So, well, that's our show for today. Thank you all for listening. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for the two of us, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the content that Josh and I discuss on the show, please rate and review the podcast so other tennis enthusiasts can find it more easily. Additionally, to be notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube, and you can also check us out on Instagram. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership, where you can learn about the benefits of being part of the Tennis IQ podcast community. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.